find their wines in the United States as well?
Not. I think it might take a little bit of searching, and you might have to ask your local wine shop to order it in for you. But you can find it in certain states. I'm not sure exactly which states and which wine stores, but keep an eye out, and you should be able to find it.
So this winery has been operative, as you say, for a century and
Hmm.
a half. So it was really predates when Ann Tasca got started and opened up into this whole cooking side of things, right?
Right. So it was 1987, actually, when the school really got going. And Anna, she was the niece of Giuseppe Tasca, who was running the winery at that point. And she decided that she wanted to. She was always a little bit the black sheep. She didn't want to really be doing the winery with her family. She was more involved with the gardening and with the farming. And so they had the horse stables, which weren't really being used as part on the estate. And she decided to completely renovate the horse stables and turn it into a operating cooking school at that point. So it was a big undertaking, especially at that time in Sicily when really tourism wasn't such a big thing as it is today. In the late 80s, early 90s, some people were still maybe scared to come to Sicily. They had heard stories about the mafia and this and that. But she decided she wanted to put Sicilian food on the map, especially for an audience in America and in Northern Europe. And so she took this over and she became kind of a spokesperson for Sicilian cooking, and cooking, but done in a way that was connecting people to the land and to the traditions, and just bringing people back to that, because I think that was something that she felt was being undervalued at the time.
Well, and also we have to bear in mind, everything's out there on the internet to access these, find these kinds of things like cooking schools and wineries everywhere. But back then there was no internet, and Sicily was really just so far away, and it just didn't cross people's mind. So it was really quite a creative and adventurous thing for her to do at the time.
Definitely. No, I mean, she really had to put herself out there. So instead of promoting herself on social media like we do today and having a great website to attract people, she was actually having to fly to the US at least once a year with her private chef. And they would bring things like ricotta or cannoli shells. They would bring their own ingredients. And so then when they went to these fairs and these promotional events, they could showcase the best of Sicily and the best of where the family lived in the countryside there, the best of these ingredients. And it was the thing, you had to do it in person. And initially she was taking reservations via fax machines. I mean, people didn't really have their cell phones. They couldn't call and show up, and people didn't have GPS, to drive out to the middle of nowhere Sicily. Also for the people visiting the school, it's about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive from Palermo, and you're driving on small windy roads to get there. And so predating all these great technological advances that we have today, it was also quite a trip for people to even get to the school. So no, it was really, she was ahead of her time, I think, in establishing something like this, a really rural, adventurous cooking experience. I like to even call it more than a cooking school, it's a cooking Sicilian experience, because you're really immersed in the countryside and a way of life which has disappeared in a lot of parts of Sicily. But because we're so rural and because we're so far away from Palermo or Catania, the big cities, the pace of life is much slower. And it's much more the way it was 20, 30, 40 years ago there. Things just evolve a lot slower. It's a different thing where you're closer to Tunisia than you are to Rome. So you have much more of a Northern African and Middle Eastern influence there, I think, than you do from Piedmont, Milano, Torino. I mean, all these cities in the north of Italy feel very, very far away, which was actually something that really intrigued me about going there, because I felt like when I was in Rome and working at the Rome Sustainable Food Project, we were taking influences from all of Italy and really looking at the country and looking at the best practices we could bring into the kitchen. In Sicily, I look more to North African influences and for flavors and research, going into these small towns, and people are speaking Sicilian, really. I mean, they're not speaking Italian first. When they speak to me, they speak Italian, because when they speak Sicilian, I can't understand anything. It feels closer to Arabic than it does to Italian. And so a lot of the traditions of Sicily really I feel like in some ways are much more rooted in North African and Middle Eastern traditions and Greek. The Greek influence, you can still really feel it today.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've been in some with friends in Palermo into private homes, and they all have. You go in the kitchen, and they've got like a jar of pine nuts and raisins mixed together that they just grab out with their hand and so that sweet and sour kind of a thing is really inherent to Sicilian cuisine, and that definitely came not from Italy, but from these countries you're talking about. Yeah.
Definitely. And you find almost more influences of Sicilian cuisine with the cuisine of Venice. Because if you think about it historically, the trade routes and the spice routes. And so Sicily was part of the spice route. And so spices that were coming into Sicily then made its way either to Genoa or to Venice. And so you see the cuisine, it's much more linked to some of these port cities from hundreds of years ago because of the influences than it is to Calabria or Basilicata, just across the Strait of Messina from us.
So, what are some of those spices?
Cinnamon is a huge one. We use a lot of cinnamon in our cooking, a lot of black pepper. So when I think of Calabrian food or I think of food in Puglia, they use so many amazing hot chili peppers and dried chilies. Their food has a really beautiful kick from that. But we actually use very little chili flakes. We use a lot of black pepper, a lot of cinnamon, a lot of nutmeg. Coriander and cumin even works its way into the cuisine a little bit because of the North African influence from there. So I think people are really surprised by the use of spices that we use on a daily basis in our food.
You have to know so much about history and geography to really understand cuisine. And I remember when I was in school, like high school and stuff, I thought, oh, history, geography. But now I've realized that that's so important to understanding cuisine.
It definitely is. It definitely is. And I think that's something the school that, we're pushing now, we're researching and we're looking at these old recipes and trying to make the links behind how something became what it is today and how we know it as today. I see Fabrizia Lanza, who now runs the school. I see her more, she's not a chef. I wouldn't say she's a chef. I think she's a very good cook, but she's more of a researcher and a scholar before anything else. She loves to really get into the nitty gritty of the historical implications of the cuisine and the people and the culture and the traditions of the island. And so that's something when people come to the school and they do a cooking lesson with us or a week stay with us, they're really learning not just recipes, they're learning everything else that makes Sicily unique, and especially the place where we are unique.
So Fabrizia is Anatasca Lanza's daughter.
Exactly.